I'm Angel, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're a subscriber. Today, I'm with my friend Elizabeth, and we are going to be talking about historiographies. So let's get to it. I think first we should define a historiography.
Historiography is the study of history, according to the dictionary. But in the process of taking history courses, doing academic writing, historiography really is a section of an academic writing, or it can be a historiographic essay. And the focus of either of these things is really on the arguments presented by other historians over your topic and where your argument is situated within those arguments.
So my favorite way to write a historiography is to write about everybody who disagrees with me and then tell my reader how they're wrong.
Okay, that's one way to do it. Yeah.
What's your best way?
It depends on the topic. I mean, there's some topics of history where most historians have some sort of a consensus over, I think, here's a super broad example, but I would go out on a limb to say that most historians agree that when you discuss the Holocaust, it's often in a sad, negative way. Hitler as a human being, I think, is mostly regarded as a bad human being. Those are things that I think that there's a kind of agreement on. Perhaps the extent or the scope of atrocity, how mechanisms were applied by him during the Holocaust, those might be areas where historians might differ, or even the cause of the Holocaust might be contentious. But so I think it depends on the topic as far as whether, is it a really heated debate between historians who really do not agree over something versus there's a consensus, but maybe we disagree on these other aspects.
So if you're going to write a 20-page paper, how many other historians would you say you should read on that topic and then try to build into your historiography?
18, maybe. I think that you should have 18 secondary sources for a 20-page paper. Half that in primary, unless, primary sources, I think, if you have, should be used, but you also, I think it also depends on what level you are.
Okay.
I think maybe if you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, you should have more secondary sources because you haven't the experience of being an active historian or a working historian yet. If it's a topic that you want to move on and use in a PhD or your future career, this would be kind of you establishing a historiography that maybe you could use later. Maybe more seasoned historians already have familiarity within their own kind of mind and their life. But I also kind of think that when I approach a paper of that size, I tend to think about it, there should probably be a secondary source per page of active writing. So if it's 20 pages, will you need a secondary source for your intro or your conclusion? Maybe you won't, because maybe that's not you engaging the text, maybe that's you engaging just your argument, so maybe you won't need a citation. But for the rest of the paper, then yeah, I think that would be really, and then primary sources, I think at least 8. What do you think?
I think the more the better.
Yeah.
And especially if you're able to get those sources that are supporting and countering your argument,
right,
and you
exactly,
can bring them
correct.
together, the more of those both that you have, the better. Because what you don't want to do, I think, most historians would say, is only pick the sources that support
Yeah.
your idea and your thesis.
I agree.
Because that's not how history's supposed to be done.
So I agree with you, though, that choosing or selecting historians that differ, I think it'll be more effective as you continue your academic career to be able to fully, because I do think it's challenging, and I've realized for myself that I can tell your audience, this is what I know from having taken the classes I have, how to write a historiography, based on several different faculty, what their standards are for historiography. But doing that, right? It's one thing to tell an audience, well, okay, this is what a paper guidelines said, versus doing it yourself.
Right.
And I do think that it's hard, and that you can lose track of your thesis doing a historiography like that. So whatever your thesis is, how much effort or how much you engage the historiography needs to adapt. You don't want a historiography section in a paper to just be a summary of the sources you're using. And you don't want it to take away from the flow of your paper as a whole, right? So you have to be able to use your historiography to further your own argument, so make it about you, versus a summary of sources, versus getting lost in the historiographic debate. So carefully selecting maybe a handful of your sources, because again, if we're talking a 20-page paper, you have 18 secondary sources, and you write like that has the potential to just turn into a historiographic essay.
Right.
And the biggest difference between a historiographic essay and a research paper is that your research paper is obviously you researching a topic, developing a thesis or an argument about it, and then defending it with a small section about the historiography to help introduce the topic to your audience. Versus a historiographic essay, which would be you solely engaging in the argument of history. Where these historians fit in, there's a little bit of room for you to have an argument, but you aren't the purpose, right?
Right. Yeah.
It usually is. And in an academic paper, you have to get to your thesis quickly, because otherwise, what's the point of reading it? What's the point of doing it?
And I think for anyone who isn't working at the graduate level, who's watching this video and is hearing us talk about a 20-page paper, that's basically a weekend project for us.
Yeah.
So it's really not a lot of page to develop our ideas, so you really have to front load it, hit it heavy right out of the gate.
It's pretty paradoxical, though, isn't it? With 20-page or 30-page papers, like on the one hand, it seems so long,
Right.
and there's a lot of room for your reader to get bored.
That's true.
And like just tap out, be done. But then, on the other hand, it is small, because as you're doing the research process, you have to decide what's going to make it into that final draft. And whether you're going to be that student who says, well, page count matters more than context, or the actual substance of the work.
Don't be that student.
Don't be that student, but I think that some of us are guilty of it, and we shouldn't, we need to, is that background really necessary? We probably should edit that out. But, I mean, I think it's an honest and it's a reasonable problem. And again, depending on the topic, if you somehow stumble upon a super underdeveloped topic, and there's not much written about it in terms of secondary sources, then probably everything you find you're going to want to include.
Right.
Versus, if you're writing about a particular demographic of people in World War II, you have to decide how much of the other stuff. World War II is a humongous topic. You have to decide what's really relevant, and you really have to narrow in and make sure that everything you're doing is defending your thesis and not getting lost and all of these other huge things that come up in World War II at, like, you know, the undergraduate level especially. I think choosing a topic that has a large historiography could be really helpful to kind of get used to what at the very least, reading several monographs. I think that reading several of them at the undergraduate level give you an idea of how these historians tackle the process. Where do they include their thesis? How do they defend it? How do they handle historiography? You can use what they did for your own writing, and you should do it for your own writing. Go through, if you are an undergraduate or a graduate student, and you're watching this video because you want to get better at writing historiography, which I hope that's the whole reason that you clicked on this video, go to your books that you bought for one of your courses and just go through all of the introductions and see, did they handle historiography? How did they do it? How do they reference historians? In what way? How does it circle back to their thesis? Do you know the thesis of the book? Like, those are things that you should absolutely be doing, because when you sit down to write your 20-page paper, no, you're not going to have that much page to devote to what the book did, but find your own way to use those things in your own writing.
Thank you for watching this video, and if you liked it, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!
How's that happen? She's just gonna do it.
She's just gonna do it.
Or like it's a study of history. I want to redo it.
Okay.
Do it now?
Yeah.
Okay, then you're gonna edit it out?
Yeah.
Okay. We should have a blooper section.
That's right.
Yes, bloopers at the end of the video.
That's right.
Like and subscribe.